Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this video on YouTube, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We're diving into the Pittsburgh Penguins Power Rankings, and I know typically we do this on Monday, but some things came up. We had to push it to Tuesday, and thankfully, the Penguins did absolutely nothing of note in last night's game. It was a full team effort to lose 7-1 to the Dallas Stars, so I didn't have to change my list at all. Speaking of my list, let's jump in with the one player that has dropped from last week's rankings, that being center Lars Eller. And again, through no fault of his own, it just feels like there is one player that deserves that number 5 spot a little bit more than Lars Eller this week. So I dropped Eller out of the rankings. He's been one of the most consistent members of the Pittsburgh Penguins, despite the fact that he's cooled off a little bit since that hot start, But I still see him as one of the most consistent members of the Pens. I see him as one of the better contributors on the forward side of things. And even though he technically got demoted in the lineup last night from second line center down to third line center, I think that's obviously because, well, everybody knows Evgeni Malkin is the second best center whenever he's playing the position. So I still have Lars Eller on my radar for these power rankings. He's somebody that can certainly bounce back up into the top 5 as soon as next week. But as of right now, I have him labeled as an honorable mention. I have one other honorable mention before we get into the top 5. And honestly, I probably should have put him at number 5, but individually, I just like more what I saw out of my number 5, and we'll get to him in a minute. But the second honorable mention this week goes to Michael Bunting. He had a really rough start to the season this year, so much so that he ended up getting healthy scratched on a couple of occasions. The Penguins desperately tried to find out, how can we get this guy going? How can we get this kick started? How can we get Michael Bunting to be the contributor that he was late last season? Because if you don't remember, he had the second most points of anybody traded at the trade deadline behind only Jake Gensel. He had, I believe it was 19 points in 21 games played with the Penguins late last season. That's the version that the Pens need of Michael Bunting, and far from the version that they got of Michael Bunting early in this season. But sometimes all it takes is that one goal, that one lucky bounce, that one time where you see the puck go in the back of the net, that it just starts to click. And that seems to be the case for Michael Bunting over the last 4 games played, because 4 games ago, he scores that first goal of the season. And since, maybe he's only tacked on one other goal, but his performance has been night and day to what it was before he lit the lamp a couple of games back. So not only does he have 2 goals in his last 4 games played, he's back in the top 6 alongside Evgeni Malkin and Brian Rust on the Penguins' second forward line. His ice time has steadily increased, and so too has his performance. The Penguins have outshot opponents 30-16 in the last 4 games played when Michael Bunting is on the ice. He has 64% of the expected goals for, as well as 64% of the scoring chances for when on the ice at 5-on-5 as well, per natural stat trick. Michael Bunting seemingly back on his way to being a very important contributing member of the Pittsburgh Penguins lineup, and because of that, he's going to get the second honorable mention of the week. Let's jump into the top 5, starting with number 5, and a guy that really is neck and neck with both Eller and both Bunting for this 5th and final spot. And that's Noel Acciari. This is the second time he's been ranked number 5 in the power rankings this season. In 17 games played, he has 2 goals, 3 assists, and I just think overall he's been very good when put into really any role. Now, the couple of games, or I believe it was only 1 game that he spent as a second line winger, wasn't great, but at the same time, what do you expect? This is a guy that is a pure bottom sixer and has been throughout his entire career. You shouldn't be giving him second line minutes at any stage of this season, but he's been really good in other opportunities. Hence the reason that he's still on the third forward line over a guy like Valtteri Puustinen, because whenever you're putting together a lineup, you would think, okay, Jesse Puljujärvi, Lars Eller, Valtteri Puustinen, that makes sense as a third line. But because of the performance of Noel Acciari this season, he's up there instead. And honestly, he's handling those responsibilities well. I think that he's playing much better in the offensive end than he did all of last season. And because of that, you're seeing his ice time get a little bit more overall throughout this season. He's averaging one more minute of ice time than he had all of last season. I believe it's from 13 minutes up to 14. So Noel Acciari has been really good for the Penguins, and he's doing all the things that he typically does too, right? He's still laying the body. He's among the leaders on the Penguins in hits. He's among the leaders in the Penguins in block shots. So he's doing all of that, but he's adding a little bit more offensive flair, which is what we all wanted to see from Noel Acciari coming into this season, and he certainly has delivered. So Noel Acciari clocks in at number 5 for the second time this season. Number 4, and one of the changes from last week's power rankings, is Rickard Rakell. Down one spot, and again, through no fault of his own. There's just a player that I think had one performance that warranted getting moved up in this list, and we'll get to him in a second. But Rickard Rakell falls down to number 4 in this week's rankings. 17 games played, 6 goals, 5 assists. He is one of only 2 Pittsburgh Penguins with a positive plus-minus. Shout out to Nick Horwat for letting me know that earlier today. He is a +4 on the season. The only other one is Blake Lizotte, who's only played in 6 games. I believe he is a +1. But Rakell himself continues to be the Penguins' best winger, and the rankings reflect that. He's the only winger that is in here, I guess, except for Noel Acciari, who's a winger/center, but the only top 6 winger that's on this list right now, as far as the top 5 is concerned, is Rickard Rakell, and it's because he has been undoubtedly the Penguins' best winger this season. Number 3, I'm going to go with the rookie. I'm going to go with the goaltender, and I'm going to go with Joel Blomqvist. I know. He was pulled last night. It was ugly, but as I said at the beginning of the show, it was ugly for everybody. A lot of those chances on Blomqvist, a lot of those chances on Nedeljkovic, who came in relief, were complete defensive breakdowns, which is nothing new for the Pittsburgh Penguins. What is new is Joel Blomqvist not being able to just kind of save the day for the Pittsburgh Penguins early in the game. But because of what he was able to do in Washington, I'm going to move him up one spot. He is 3-5-0 on the season, a 3.6 goals against average, a .904 save percentage, and the Penguins' best goaltender to this point in the season. Between him and Jarry, between him and Nedeljkovic, it's him. Now, what do the Penguins do in the goaltending situation as it moves forward? I don't know, but all I know right now is he is undoubtedly the best goaltender the Pittsburgh Penguins have at their disposal. 32 saves on 34 shots against the Washington Capitals, and the Penguins' lone win in their last 4 games played. So for that reason, Joel Blomqvist moves up to number 3. Number 2 and number 1, there's no change. Sidney Crosby remains at number 2 with 6 goals, 10 assists in 17 games played this season. He's cooled off a little bit from his red-hot stretch a couple weeks ago. Only has 1 point in his last 3 games played, but he's still playing at a much higher level than he was before he had to get the wake-up call with Evgeni Malkin jumping up to his line. Now, frustration started to mount yesterday. 4 penalty minutes, including absolutely bullying Sam Steele, but Crosby is still playing at a very high level in these last 3 games, despite falling off of the score sheet. And you would have to imagine, now that they've kind of separated Malkin and Crosby a bit, that that's going to continue with Drew O'Connor on his left and with Rickard Rakell on his right. So Crosby, no change, stays at number 2. And Malkin, once again, for the 5th consecutive week to start this season, is going to rank in at number 1 on the Pittsburgh Penguins Power Rankings. Malkin leads the Pens with 18 points, 5 goals, 13 assists. He had a nice night again against the Washington Capitals. Everybody always likes to talk Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin in those matchups, but more often than not, Evgeni Malkin ends up making a huge play and stealing the show. He did that again at Capital One Arena last week, maintaining his lead over Crosby in my eyes because of his performance against the Caps. Leading his own line, the question becomes, can he create? Now that he's back on that second line, now that he's back with Michael Bunting, now that he's back with Brian Russ, can he create? Can he continue to perform at the level that he has throughout the season now that he's separated from Crosby? It's not like he went off when he was with Crosby. Crosby certainly went off. Rickard Rakell continued to put in points, but Evgeni Malkin, in those 6 games that he was up on that first line, 2 goals, 2 assists. Not bad, 4 points in 6 games, but one of them was a power play goal, so regardless of where he was in the forward lineup, he would have scored that goal anyway. But 2 goals, 2 assists in 6 games played. Can Malkin now translate that back into being the Penguins' second-line center. I would guess he's going to. I would assume he's going to, but that much we'll have to wait and see. Their next matchup is tomorrow night against the Detroit Red Wings, and then we'll see how these lines and how this power ranking shakes up between now and next Monday. But that's going to do it for this episode. One last recap of the power rankings in week 5. Nola Jarry at number 5, Rickard Rakell down to number 4, Yoel Blomqvist moves up 1 spot to number 3, and then number 2 and number 1 remain the same as they were last week. Sidney Crosby at 2, Evgeni Malkin ranking at number 1. But that is going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.